The French president is facing one of the biggest crises of his tenure as a big strike led by French unions is underway. French rail workers, air traffic controllers, teachers, public sector staff staging walkouts and taking to the streets. They are marking their protests against the proposed changes to the pension system there. Hundreds of thousands of French workers have taken to the streets through Paris and other cities. This is the first day of an indefinite national strike. The protesters have disrupted almost all public transport, posing one of the biggest challenges to President Emmanuel Macron since the Yellow Vest demonstrations began a year ago. The rail services have been also disrupted across France, along with the Paris metro and bus networks. According to the state rail group, about 1 in 10 trains were running on suburban and high-speed lines, while international services such as Eurostar also have been affected. Flights are also being hit by industrial action at Air France and by some air traffic controllers who've also participated in that demonstration. Most teachers are on strike, with health workers, firefighters and students joining marches to air a range of grievances. These are related to issues of staffing, financing, work conditions overall. A total of 245 separate demonstrations have been announced across the country. The Eiffel Tower has been closed to the public on the first day of a nationwide strike over pension reforms. The strike has wiped out 90% of high-speed train services, 80% of inter-regional trains and 10 of the Paris metro lines. The protests are being staged against the pension reforms proposed by the French president. So what exactly is the proposed pension reform? The French president's new plan aims to reward employees on a day-to-day basis. The points earned every day will then be transferred into future pension benefits. The official retirement age has been raised in the last decade from 60 to 62. Meanwhile, those retiring before the age of 64 would receive a lower pension. For instance, if someone is retiring at the age of 63, would be receiving 5% less. The cost of France's current system in terms of pension spending as a percentage of the GDP is among the highest in the world at 14%, whereas the UK is spending less than half of that. And joining us on the broadcast this minute is our correspondent Elena Cases-Montanez, live from Paris. Hi, Elena. Bring us up to speed with the latest that you see around you at this point. This is the first day of what's being called an indefinite national strike.
Yes, as you were saying there, France is ground almost to a halt today as 90% of trains have been cancelled and the vast majority of the Paris metro isn't running either. About 1 school in 3 has been forced to close after 78% of teachers across France have also not come into work today. And here on the streets of Paris, protesting around me, we also have firefighters, hospital workers and people from a wide range of professions who are all concerned about that pension reform. As you were saying there, we don't actually know in any detail what the pension reform is. All that we know is that the French government wants to go from a current system where there are 42 different sets of rules about pensions depending on your profession to one where there would be one set of rules for everybody, and a number of professions are worried that they're going to lose out on special entitlements like the ones that train drivers have, for example, which enables them to retire as early as 53. But for the majority of French people, even if they don't benefit from any of those special privileges themselves, they're concerned about the creation of one regime for everybody because they're worried that means watering it down to the lowest common denominator and that in the end everybody's pensions will be lower.
Right, so that is what the protesters or say the union workers have been saying. What about the authorities who have at the moment failed to pacify those on the ground with their reassurances? This is one of the biggest challenges for the French president post the Yellow Vest demonstrations.
It absolutely is a serious challenge to him, since this looks like the most well-followed strike since 1995, which was also about pensions. The government of the time was forced to back down, and every French president since has tried to reform the generous pension system and been unsuccessful. They've all been defeated by the scale of protests on the street. Now, the government, as I was saying, has yet to announce any detail of its planned reform. They continue to insist it will be good for some people, like freelancers, the self-employed, and women who've taken time out to have a child, who are losing out from the current system. But they're also saying they're refusing to back down on the idea of creating one universal system for everybody. It depends, though, of course, how long these street protests go on for and how disruptive they are, as to whether the government continues to stick to its guns.
Absolutely. We're going to leave it there for the moment, though. Alina, I appreciate very much you joining us on the broadcast with the very latest from the streets of Paris. It is an indefinite strike against the proposed pension plan. And as Alina is telling us, this is looking like a protest, which is one of the biggest challenges for the French president.